Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome once again to this episode for this special week of coverage marking 2 years of genocide. And we are looking at 2 years of Israel's global decline. Today, speaking about an area that we cannot imagine to omit when we speak about the isolation that Israel is experiencing in the world today, such an important factor, which is the factor of economic embargoes, boycotts, BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Let's put this in a bit of perspective. Where was the Israeli entity prior to October 7th in terms of its global isolation economically? And how has the genocide only accelerated this particular trend? Let's uh, put a proviso here that investing in Israel, supporting Israeli products because of its apartheid, because of its racism, because of its ethnic cleansing, was always unethical and illegal. But what BDS has done is ensure that it becomes financially unviable as well. So some people, unfortunately, do not take a decision, and some companies in some countries do not make decisions based on it being unethical and illegal. They purely look at the bottom line. But when they see that it's no longer financially viable to be able to invest in a particular country, then that would be the final straw for them. So prior to October 7th, particularly in the years 2022 and 2023, because of this shift in elites in the state of Israel, what we did find is there was a judicial crisis, and Netanyahu obviously trying to stack up the courts with members of his right wing allies to be able to shield himself and his allies from accountability. And this led to hundreds of top Israeli economists sounding the alarm, saying that there's now a concentration of power within a certain group. There's no checks and balances, and this could have a devastating impact on the Israeli economy. And already, for this particular reason, not anything to do with BDS, the instability in the country at that particular time, prior to October the 7th, already something like $780 million were withdrawn by high-tech companies from the Israeli entity. Some of the figures that are put forward are even higher. For example, the CEO of one investment house said that since those judicial plans were announced, Israel had lost something like $10 billion, funds that left Israel and did not enter. And investors are looking for a safe market that they could not find in Israel. Already from that time, prior to October the 7th, a lot of Israeli startups in 2003, actually 80% opened outside Israel. So they were Israeli entities, but they didn't find that confidence to be able to register within Israel, and that's already resulted in a severe blow to Israel's tax coffers. Uh, Many high-tech leaders were then part of the protests and anti-Netanyahu judicial reform protests, and they said that the new policies that are being pursued by Netanyahu and his coalition were a existential threat to Israel's high-tech industry. And there were already fears at that particular time that Israel, not for any external threat, but actually from the internal dynamics, was heading to a civil war, and that's something the Israeli president Isaac Herzog had already said. And in this period, still before October the 7th, before because of all of these internal reasons, you had Moody's downgrading Israel's credit rating for the first time in history. And this was the picture then prior to October the 7th. So this means that there was a shaky economy in Israel already, not necessarily due to BDS. BDS was gaining strength around the world even prior to the genocide, but majority of these outflows from Israel were due to its own internal instability. How does the genocide change all of that? Since the start of the genocide, we have foreign investors taking out more than $9 billion from the stock market in Israel, and $4 billion withdrawn from Israeli bonds. 80% of Israeli startups having suffered damages. 50% of Israeli startups, left with less than 6 months of cash. And because of the dire straits the Israeli economy has been in since October the 7th, one CEO, the CEO of Israel's leading corporate finance investment house, said something quite telling, where he said that the most Zionist thing you can do right now is to bring money into Israel from foreign investors. The most Zionist thing you can do right now is to bring money into Israel from foreign investors. So a kind of, well, it's business, but it's a kind of cap in hand. We desperately need you to be able to bail us out. 46,000 Israeli businesses have shut down. A statistic from October, or rather July 2024, already a year ago. 46,000 Israeli businesses had shut down. And then you have the massive outflow from big corporations who are complicit. Many of them are still investing in Israel, but they themselves have seen that it is no longer viable, or we need to diversify, take some of our investments elsewhere. Intel, which contributed a large amount to Israel's entire GDP, they froze the construction of a $25 billion factory in occupied Palestine. Norway's largest sovereign fund divested from Israel bonds. Churches in the United States divested from Israel bonds. Norway's largest pension company divesting from Caterpillar. Samsung announcing that it would shut down its Tel Aviv, its Samsung's innovation arm, rather, particularly would shut down its Tel Aviv operations. You have energy companies like BP and like Chevron, who are still complicit in the Israeli occupation. They also withdrew or scaled down their proposed business plans within the Israeli state, citing the security situation in the region. And then you have, nobody needs to be able to explain this, the organic boycotts around the world, the effects on Pepsi, the effects on Coca-Cola, the effects, hopefully in South Africa, on Clover, the effects on McDonald's, the effects on Starbucks, which are all very well known. Global sales of McDonald's last year fell by 1.5% between July and September, and it has faced boycotts and protests all over the world because of its perceived pro-Israel stance and alleged financial ties to the country. Beyond investments, beyond products, Israeli experts said that 2024 was the year that will be marked as the year that tourism in the Israeli entity died. And Israeli media reports last year also said in a short period of time, in just 1 week, 5 restaurants dramatically shut down in Tel Aviv because of this drop in tourism. Moody's took it further. Israel's credit rating was downgraded 2 notches. It was warned of a junk rating. Israel's debt skyrocketed, and Moody's said that they estimated a 0% Israeli growth rate in 2024, or S&P said that they estimated a 0% Israeli growth rate in 2024. And here's quite a telling pronouncement. In May 2024, 130 top Israeli economists sent the Israeli genocidal prime minister a clear and emphatic warning of the high probability that Israel's economy and society will fall into a spiral of collapse. The prominent Israeli economist David Ben David argues that Israel has 4 years before it collapses, unless government policies undergo drastic changes. So Israel is quite vulnerable because many of its eggs are in the tech basket, and the tech basket is very much intertwined with the Israeli military. So if one fails, the other fails, and if one is a target, and certainly the Israeli military is a target all over the world for its war crimes, then inevitably the tech industry that sponges off it or grows from it is going to be vulnerable as well. Um, and this is now how we reflect on 2 years of Israel's global decline. The stats speak for themselves. As the chairman of the Israel Export Institute had said, BDS and boycotts have changed Israel's global trade landscape. We fight every day, hour by hour, for Israeli industry abroad. Economic boycotts and BDS organizations present major challenges, and in some countries, we are forced to operate under the radar. International investors see increased risk in doing business with Israel, and this leads to reduced foreign investment and lower economic growth. And the fact that there are now arrest warrants for Netanyahu, Israel is on the watch list of the International Criminal Court. A growing number of international companies do not want to be identified with Israel, investments in Israel, and they see there will be very negative pushback against them, demonstrations, moves by employees or investments, and transactions that won't reap any fruition at all. This was all the product of the sacrifices of the people of Gaza and the resistance and their resilience. And it's also the dividends that are now being reaped because of the global BDS movement. And I've just cited the economic impact, but BDS has reaped its dividends in faith-based communities, in the academic sphere, in the cultural sphere, boycotts there as well from trade unions, and also in the sporting sphere. But we always have to conclude with a sense of realism, and the realism is a message to you and I. Is if we have not been part of this massive move economically to isolate Israel, part of the BDS of Israel, then we are clearly on the wrong side. Things are moving fast, and we are actually supporting the oppressor if we are not moving. We need to, make sure that we do not stick in one place relating to our boycotts. We need to diversify, moving from individual consumer items that do have an impact, but also looking at the list being much larger, and there's a need to move to the other areas and lobby in the other areas, divestment and sanctions. And lastly, we need to pool our diverted resources, all these diverted resources, into building our own power, our own economic power, buying locally, buying Muslim, and using that to be able to support our causes. I encourage you to read the report of Francesca Albanese to broaden our minds that it's not just about Coke and Clover and McDonald's. One needs to look at the big corporate players that still benefit, and will do everything to ensure that the genocide continues. But the last word on all of this is apartheid Israel, a self-declared start-up nation, seems to be turning into a shutdown nation, gradually repelling investments and evoking memories of apartheid South Africa in the late 1980s. That's all for today. See you again on 2 years of Israel's global decline tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.